April 5th Planning Commission meeting. We currently have 3 members and we're waiting for one more to get a quorum at least. So please bear with us for a few more moments. It looks like we have, it looks like we have Commissioner Hauser now. And we have Commissioner Dormerit and Commissioner Ferguson.
Hello, everyone.
All right, well, it looks like we're ready to get started. Before we get started, I'm gonna read a few notes on how we will conduct this meeting. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-25-20 and N-39-20, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act and pursuant to the orders of the Health Officer of San Mateo County. And as this meeting is necessary so that the city can conduct necessary business, it is permitted under the orders as an essential governmental function. Commissioners, the Assistant City Attorney, and city staff essential to this meeting will be video/teleconferencing into the meeting, and there will be no physical location open to the public. The public can observe the meeting while sheltering at home via the Zoom link as the primary means of participation, or via cable channel 26 or live stream broadcasts as alternate methods of viewing the meeting. Participation via the Zoom link will enable the meeting to be observed live and will enable the public to speak during public comment periods. The Zoom link was published in the meeting agenda. Live public comments are being accepted at this meeting in place of emailed public comments. Public comments may be provided live by members of the public utilizing the Zoom link to participate in the meeting. Utilize the raise hand function in the Zoom application on a computer, smartphone, or tablet, or else enter *9 to raise your hand if dialing in by phone. Please ensure your name is correctly entered in your Zoom profile so city staff may properly identify you when it is your turn to speak. Those dialing in by phone will be called to speak by the last 4 digits of their phone number as shown in the Zoom interface. All right, with that said, can we have a roll call, please?
Vice Chair Berman.
Present.
Commissioner Domerat.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson. Commissioner Ferguson. Unable to hear you, but I'll note that Commissioner Ferguson is present. Commissioner Godwin.
Here.
Commissioner Hauser.
Present.
Commissioner Leal.
Present.
Great, and next up, the salute to the flag. Commissioner Hauser, do you mind leading us in the salute to the flag?
Sure.
Thanks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Do we have an approval of the order of agenda for tonight? Oh, Commissioner Hauser.
I'll make a motion to approve the order of agenda.
Commissioner Leal.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Berman.
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat.
Yes.
Commissioner Ferguson. All right, still cannot hear you. A thumbs up for a yes. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Godwin.
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser.
Yes.
Commissioner Leal.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Great, and moving on to approval of minutes. So it looks like we have the March 15th, 2021 minutes on the agenda to approve. Would anyone like to make a motion approving those minutes? Commissioner Godwin,
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Commissioner Hauser?
I'll second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat,
Yes.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Yes.
Commissioner Godwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser,
Yes.
Commissioner Leal.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
All right, and the designation of liaison to the city council meeting on April 12th, 2021. And this is item TA-119-21, a special use permit text amendment. Mr. Murdoch, do you mind telling us a little bit about this item?
Absolutely, Vice Chair Berman. So this is a zoning text amendment affecting the special use permit provisions of the city's municipal code. The Planning Commission considered this item on March 15th and made a recommendation to approve the amendment to the City Council. And so the City Council will be conducting a public hearing on April 12th, as required by state law and the municipal code, to consider whether to introduce the ordinance. And if they do, then there will be a second meeting, typically on the consent calendar, for them to adopt the ordinance. No liaisons typically required at that second meeting.
Thank you. Would any commissioner like to volunteer? Likely a commissioner that was present during that topic that we reviewed and approved.
Yeah, and that would include you, Vice Chair Berman, Commissioner Godwin, and Commissioner Hauser, among those commissioners present today.
If Commissioner Godwin and Commissioner Hauser are not able, I will just check my calendar really quick. I could serve as liaison to that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Berman.
Okay. All right, and now on to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission that is not on the agenda. The time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
We do. We will start with Mary Ann Waterman. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm out of town, but I came on the phone. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Hi, how are you? You know I speak at every meeting. I'm not going to miss one. So let me just say about the 650 Cape Breton. We live adjacent to 650 Cape Breton. Again, I want to reiterate, there's one way in, there's one way out of the entire town. You have to go Odstead, you have to go Everglades, you have to go Terra Nova, you have to go Lindemar to get to Highway 1 to get out of town. They have applied for a temporary permit. It is a smoke and mirrors tactic. They'll be perfect tenants for the 6 months of the temporary permit, and then they're going to apply for a permanent permit. You know that, and I know that. Nobody buys a $3.5 million property in the Bay Area to put up a tent and call it a day. This is a stepping stone to permanent zoning. They claim that the stable had events. My daughter, we have lived at that property for 3 years. There has never, let me say never with a capital N, been an event at the stables that had more than 10 cars, ever in 3 years. And my daughter is a stay-at-home mom who is at the PPC site every single day. There has never been an event at the stables that had more than 10 cars. There are 5 or 6 cars. There's people that ride their horses. There's people that feed their horses. There has never been a major event at the stable. Okay? They say there's 110 members that live in Pacifica. That's fabulous that they have 110 members that are Pacifica residents. That comes out to be 0.003% of the Pacifica population in the 2020 census. Okay? We have walked the entire neighborhood with our dogs. There is not one person that lives within walking distance that is a member of that church. Therefore, those people will be driving. They will all be driving, and then you have the traffic. And they're going to use our precious resources of the traffic and our police department and our fire department. I want to keep reiterating that. Our resources are precious. And do you want to use them for the back of the valley, for the last street in the valley, to have your police and fire come out back there in the valley? So thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it very, very much. And have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waterman.
Thank you.
Deputy Director Murdoch, do we have any other public speakers?
We do. I will bring the next one in just a minute. Next up, Christine Bowles, please go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Christine Bowles. I'm a licensed architect and a resident of the Manor District. My public comments from the March 15th hearing were not properly captured in the minutes, so I wanted to repeat and clarify a few items. I wanted to start off by congratulating Commissioner Domerat for his appointment. Our city is facing critical issues related to climate change and sea level rise, and the experience you bring on these issues with the Army Corps of Engineers is invaluable. Thank you so much for serving. Since I was last here before you regarding the Vistamar project, I've been reading and reflecting on the updates to the city's general plan that is 40 years old and based on such old science that does not even consider climate change. I discovered that our safety element is actually out of compliance with state law and Government Code 65300. Critical updates to flooding and fire risks were not done as required as part of the 2015 housing element update. I would encourage you and planning staff to review the general plan documents at your earliest convenience. Let me share one glaring example of the importance of this document as it relates to Vistamar. As you might recall, much of your discussion before approving the project centered around adding trees, both to replace the 57 trees that were being removed, but also to screen the bulky massing of the project. You might also recall that the site has an average slope of 52% and some areas with slopes up to 66%. The Commission's decision to add trees in consultation with Senior Planner Murdoch actually contradicts the 1980 safety element. Quoting from page 102, for steep slopes in excess of 50%, the slope should contain a mature stand of grass or other type of ground cover. However, shrubbery, brush, and trees appear to be more harmful to the overall stability of steep slopes and should be avoided. The conditions you added to the project actually increase the dangers of landslides to our neighborhood. I'd also like to encourage you to refresh your understanding of CEQA laws, specifically when environmental review is required on a project and what triggers a more in-depth EIR. I will email you all a document from the City of San Luis Obispo that they put together to explain land use and CEQA regulations to incoming commissioners and council members. Pages 15 and 16 talk about the fair argument standard when neighbors pay for and provide environmental reports that conflict with those of the city's consultants. If there are conflicting experts, it is not up to you or the City Council to make the determination as to which expert is correct. An EIR must be prepared that will make the independent determination. The paper also states that this low threshold is sometimes difficult to accept for both city staff and developers, considering the substantial costs and delays associated with the EIR process. However, keep in mind that nowhere in CEQA does the cost or delay play into the decision as to whether to prepare an EIR. On behalf of all Pacifica residents, I would ask for your careful independent review of all projects that come before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles.
Next speaker, Erin Wood, please go ahead.
Erin Wood, 650 Cape Breton. Last
No,
December,
more about CEQA.
Last December, we were told the church is concerned with the welfare of not only its members, but also society in general. That appears inconsistent with the way that they gather. July 27th, 2014, INC makes history. Some of the faithful waited overnight in the pouring rain to attend the centennial celebration of the INC. Government officials monitoring the gathering estimated that 1.6 to 2 million people gathered, packing out a massive new arena built and the nearby 20,000 seat stadium, as well as huge tents erected on the grounds for the event. July 2018, 50 years in the US. July 27th, 2018, celebration in Oahu, first international location, followed by the continental-wide Unity Games, July 31st through August 3rd. Unity Games were held in San Mateo, California. This included events at San Mateo Performing Arts Center, Mills High School, Burlingame High School, Sequoia High School, and Woodside High School, ending in championship games at San Jose State University. The celebration ended with a special worship service in Sacramento, August 5th. More recently, January 2020, INC starts the new decade with a record-breaking event. More than 65,000 attendees. INC conducted simultaneous events in more than 500 venues in 156 countries, spanning 6 continents on that same day. This is a continuing effort on our part. We'll only get bigger and better for 2020 and the new decade. INC is known for hosting mega gatherings that shut down cities. And last December, they said full capacity would be services for 150 people. An example of INC's regard for safety and city officials in Seattle, October 2018. The Seattle Times reported Seattle Fire Department said about 50 people were inside the church at the time. Same story, but reported by King 5. The headline stated Seattle Church says 250 people inside at time. Questions about occupancy from the paperwork. The environmental information form, project information number 19. Is this supposed to have occupancy numbers there? And then the letter of explanation says fixed seating for 49. Is that the maximum occupancy? This is a piece of land that needs a responsible owner. Having horses in there means their caretaker will take care of their environment. There's a reason this space was being drafted into Pacifica's general plan as Park Pacifica Stables LU-I-44. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
Our next speaker is Lori Yap. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Respected planning commissioners, I really appreciate you listening to us. This is regarding 650 Cape Breton as well. I do understand that the temporary use permit has been withdrawn and another permit, a use permit application has been submitted. I know there's probably limited documents. It looks like 4 of them on the website at this time. I don't think this permit, even though they're going to change the location of where they worship in an existing building, changes anything. Any church located here is not an appropriate use of this site. The arguments still stand, as you've heard people comment on. So there's many reasons still to deny this permit as well, including traffic, noise, neighborhood parking, lighting, loss of open space, trail access, wildlife, emergency vehicle access, evacuation, and environmental issues. So I appreciate you continuing to listen to the residents. They are still paying attention. They still do care about this property and their neighborhood. And I'm hoping as planning commissioners that what this is about is responsible planning. I think when this neighborhood was planned, that was put in there. And I hope we continue to think about what is best for how this land was set up, the residents that purchased their properties to live here and whatnot. So I do truly appreciate you listening to us, listening to all the emails, listening to us at these meetings, and really hearing us. I understand you have to entertain the permit, but I don't think this new permit, from what I've seen so far online, changes anything from what it was as a temporary use permit, other than the way they say they're now going to worship in an existing building. Please continue to look at this closely. We are, as you can tell, as residents, very upset about this happening here and what could potentially it grow into. I would think a church wants to grow, so it's not going to be small no matter how small they say they're going to start. Any church wants to grow. And I think the planning commissioners will look into that and see that it's not the appropriate use for any church on this site. And I appreciate you listening to that. So thank you so much for the time to speak once again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Yap. Deputy Director Murdoch, do we have any other members of the public that wish to speak?
That was the last hand raised.
Okay, then we will move on to new public hearings. So we have one item in front of us tonight. It's file number 2017-023, specific plan SP 164-17, filed by Javier Chavaria for construction of an approximately 4,293 square foot, one-story single-family residence with a 650 square foot attached garage on a 62,562 square foot undeveloped lot located at to be determined Ohlone Drive, also known as Lot 3, Ohlone Point subdivision, formerly Harmony at 1, approximately 510 feet southwest of the intersection of Fassler Avenue and Roberts Road, assessor parcel number 022-150-470. The CEQA recommended action for this item is addendum to the Harmony at 1 Roberts Road subdivision final environmental impact report, which was certified by the Planning Commission on October 15th, 2007, and also certified by the City Council on November 13th, 2007. And staff's recommended action is approve as conditioned. Deputy Director Murdoch, do you mind providing the staff report?
Happy to, Vice Chair Berman. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Deputy Planning Director Christian Murdoch. The item before you proposes construction of a single-family residence on an existing lot within the Harmony at 1 subdivision, now known as Ohlone Point. The city approved the Harmony at 1 subdivision in 2007 as part of a planned development project. The planned development encompassed approximately 65 acres of land comprised primarily of hills along the ridgeline south of Fassler Avenue in an area of the general plan designated as open space residential with a portion designated prominent ridgeline. The open space residential land use designation requires more than 5 acres per dwelling unit. The planned development concept for the Harmony at 1 project involved clustering all of the development potential from the 65-acre site into an approximately 22-acre portion where development would occur. Within this area designated for development, the lot sizes generally range from 1 to 2 acres in size, although one of the lots is more than 5 acres in size. The balance of the project area, more than 40 acres, was set aside and preserved in a permanent open space condition. You can see here generally, maybe you can't see there, but through the lots 1 through 10 along the top central portion of that graphic on your screen, those are the areas primarily designated for development. And there are 2 additional lots towards the bottom closer to Crespi Drive, lots 11 and 12, that are also part of the planned development subdivision. Lot A and some other areas on the site, those are the large open space areas set aside for permanent open space. The project was designed as a precisely controlled planned development, including specific building envelopes designated in the environmental impact report prepared for the project, and heightened design measures to ensure environmentally sensitive building design and energy efficiency were included at a time before the current Green Building Code requirements adopted by the state of California. It is the identified building envelopes in particular that was notable for the city staff's review of this project. The red hashed area on this slide shows the approximate location of the building envelope authorized in the original EIR for Lot 3. The dark gray area demonstrates the development proposed with the current project. You can see the deviation from the building envelope is sizable. This deviation is what triggered additional environmental review by staff beyond what was included in the Certified Environmental Impact Report, or EIR. The certified EIR for the the certified EIR for the Harmony at One subdivision included mitigation measure AES-1. Among the requirements of this mitigation measure was to construct all projects within the designated building envelopes in the preliminary grading plan of the draft EIR. The proposed project deviates significantly from the building envelope as shown on the prior slide. This resulted in the city staff preparing an additional CEQA analysis called an addendum to the EIR. The addendum included additional visual simulations and other analysis to determine whether any potentially significant environmental impacts would result from the project as proposed outside of the identified building envelope. The analysis in the addendum concluded that no potentially significant environmental impacts would occur resulting from the Lot 3 project as proposed. The single-family residence proposed on Lot 3 would be a single-story structure with 4 bedrooms, approximately 4,293 square feet in floor area, and an attached 650 square foot garage. The proposed height is 17 feet. Grading would be balanced on the site in part through creation of berms on a portion of the site, which would screen the structure from views to the south and west. The building would include solar panels and a living roof on portions of the roof. The project would have an overall modern architectural style consisting of clean lines and a large amount of windows. The main exterior materials would include stucco, stacked stone veneer, and horizontal wood siding. These renderings show a bright white stucco color as proposed initially by the project applicant. As noted in the staff report, staff recommends requiring the applicant to modify the proposed stucco color to a more subdued earth tone color in order to achieve consistency with the Ohlone Point Architectural Review Guidelines. Architectural guidelines consistency is required as another element of mitigation measure AES-1 from the original project EIR. The project requires approval of 1 permit under the Pacifica Municipal Code. Approval of a specific plan is required. The specific plan approval requires 2 findings in order to approve the permit. The first is that the proposed project is consistent with the approved development plan for the planned development. The development plan is the name of the site-specific zoning imposed on a site as part of the planned development or PD zoning process. And the second finding is that the proposed structure is consistent with the city's adopted design guidelines. The analysis in the staff report demonstrates that the development plan for the Harmony at One planned development authorizes a single-family residence to be constructed on Lot 3, and that the project would be consistent with the city's adopted design guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends approval as conditioned by adopting the draft resolution attached to the staff report. Before I close, I want to note that staff received 1 written public comment prior to tonight's hearing, which staff forwarded to the Planning Commission and posted on the city's website. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director Murdoch. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Murdoch before we hear from the applicant if they're available? Or actually, Mr. Murdoch, is this an item that the applicant will be presenting to us?
Yes, the applicant and the applicant's agent are both present. I'll bring them in as panelists whenever we get to that part of this item.
Okay. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. For the building envelope, the approved versus proposed, can you give me a little bit more information about what the delta is as far as like grading numbers that was anticipated and any sort of additional demolition or tree removal?
Sure, I will bring that slide back up. So the applicant's agent is also the civil engineer for the project and was the civil engineer involved in development of the Harmony at One subdivision. So he has a lot of experience and can provide, I would say, a more in-depth explanation. Generally speaking, the topography as oriented on this slide is higher at the top of this slide and decreases going down. And so the contention from the project applicant was that this design would result in fewer visual impacts and require less disturbance to the upper topography at the higher points of the site. I'm not aware that this change in the location of the project would result in any additional tree removal, but it would result in less grading, as I understand it. And according to the applicant and is vetted in our CEQA addendum, would result in equal or fewer visual impacts as compared to the original building envelope approval. And I think it's important to note as well when weighing this deviation that the Harmony at One project approvals actually allowed 2-story single-family residences. And so there is a decrease in the visual impact from this project by virtue of its 1-story design as well.
Understood. And then the only other question I had was, can you give us just a little bit of context about how many homes were in the total approved project and kind of where this is as far as how many have moved to the next level?
Yeah, so there were 12 homes contemplated in the planned development or PD portion of the Harmony at One project. Those are the 10 lots along Ohlone Drive, which is the northernmost access point. And then there are 2 lots more southerly, as I mentioned earlier, closer to Crespi Drive. One of them near the post office down there, and then the other one just north a bit with its own driveway, lot 11 off of Roberts Road. And then there's one additional lot that is called Lot D that was included in the Harmony at One subdivision map for various reasons, not particularly to include it in the planned development. And it's in fact not a part of the homeowners association for the project, and it's not subject to the CC&Rs for the subdivision. That site received Planning Commission approval, I think about 2 years ago at this point, and that project is under construction currently. That is the only residence under construction as part of this subdivision. There was a prior approval for Lot 2 granted by the city, but that approval has since expired and the construction never started on that. So this potentially could be the first residence to be constructed within the planned development portion of Harmony at One.
Thank you.
Any other, Commissioner Godwin?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions for you, Christian. I noticed in the green architectural notes, there were still references to natural gas appliances. And it seems like that's going to be outlawed at some level by the state in relatively the next 10 years or so. Does that still make sense?
So what we have to do many times when projects are approved and many years go by prior to construction or final approvals is attempt to harmonize the differing regulations. I'm not aware of anything at this point which would prohibit this home, if approved and constructed, from having a natural gas appliance in the kitchen. Should that occur in the future, we would have to look at what those provisions are. Typically, they're prospective, meaning applying on a forward-looking basis for any new homes that are constructed or if significant modifications are made to those structures. So it would be my sense, although speculative, that this project would not be adversely affected by any such future regulation.
Okay. And I have one other obsolescence type question. I've noticed that Teslas require 60 amp circuits for chargers now, and the references in that same section, green architecture notes are to 40 amp, electric vehicle charging circuits. Do you think that's something we ought to update as well?
So that's a little bit beyond my area of expertise in terms of what the current residential code requirement might be for wiring for an electric vehicle charger. Perhaps Mr. Chavarria, when it comes to the applicant presentation part of the agenda, might be able to address that. What I would say is typically where there's a more intensive requirement, the applicant would be required to build to that. Now, whether or not the current residential code requires a 40 watt or 60 watt, I can't speak to that particular fact.
Amp, not watt.
Not watt, yes,
Sorry,
excuse me.
just to be
many
clarified.
Different figure, yes, thank you.
Okay, that were the couple of things that really stood out to me.
Any other commission questions for Christian? All right, I think we could hear from the applicant now. Looks like we have a couple representatives.
Yes, Vice Chair Berman, we have the property owner, Bijan Kozravi, and we have the applicant's agent, Javier Chavarria.
All right, great. I will welcome them to speak. Thank you.
Well, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for being here tonight. And we are very happy to finally be in front of you. It has been certainly a long road, but it's been a good road because we were able to work hand in hand with the staff and be able to resolve all the issues that the project had. And just a little bit of history. Most of you are newer to the commission that what the Harmony project, from when the Harmony project was approved. Back in 2007, when the project was approved, there were many conditions of approval that were thrown in there. Green architecture was new, and there was always the intent to do a very nice, a beautiful project, something that will minimize the visual impact from the beach, from the highway, from all the public areas. As Christian mentioned before, we had another home that was approved at lot number 2. And we learned a lot of the things that the commission at the time had concern with. And when we came to design this home, we started thinking of the most relevant issues. Number one, what do we do to minimize the impact and to make the home as nice as possible, as fitting as possible to the area? First, we decided to go 1 story. Number one, the owner wanted a single story construction as is it more accessible for him and his family, but also, and most importantly, it diminished tremendously the visual impact, particularly as seen from Rockaway Beach and as seen from Linda Mar. Also, with the original location of the site, you probably haven't had the opportunity to look at the entire subdivision map, but for some reason, when that subdivision was designed, the footprint for each one of the lots was identical. So the designer at the time kind of took a generic footprint and put it around and didn't really take advantage of the best features of the lot. So in this case, we analyze the lot, we look where we will get the best views, where can we put a building that minimize grading, and where we can put a building that actually help us comply with the conditions. We preserve as many of the trees as we could. We are disturbing less ground. And when I say disturbing, is new disturbance. During construction of the subdivision improvement, there were a lot of problems because the project started in one of the wettest years. So we ended up having 40,000 cubic yards of dirt piled up anywhere between lot 3, excuse me, between lot 3 and lot 6. So there was a tremendous amount of dirt in there. There was a road that was built to take that dirt and fill the gullies that were facing south of the property. So the entire area was generally disturbed. Nevertheless, when we're coming back to design the home, we are trying to be true to what the intent of that original design was, which is keep the majority of the steep portions of the site as undisturbed as possible. And that's exactly what we've done. I think we achieve a design that provides the less possible visual impact, that it has nice, clean lines, that it complies with all the conditions of approval from the subdivision, and we are certainly willing and ready to comply with all the current regulations. And to your comment, Commissioner Godwin, as you know, technology is changing, requirements are changing, and we will certainly provide any requirement that the code has to fulfill the needs for the current and even the future electrical chargers that will be installed on the property. With the flat roof design, it allows plenty of roof area to put solar panels, and we have a complete unprotected area, which is good for solar because you don't have any shade, you don't have anything that will prevent you from collecting a good amount of energy to suit the needs of the homes, and most likely to have as an additional energy package to sell back onto the grid. Other than that, I believe that the project will be a magnificent enhancement to the city, and this has some even more important significance. Throughout the process and the life of this subdivision, the main problem was before that none of the approvals had been done following all the guidelines, following all the criteria, and most importantly, the people that were trying to develop the lots were not really ready, in the sense that the subdivisions improvements were not completed. They were trying to cut corners, not to complete or not to do certain things. Since that, those owners are gone. A new ownership of the entire subdivision took place, and they are fully committed to comply with all the conditions of approval. And the owner of lot number 3 is certainly willing and ready to start construction as soon as possible, to comply with all the requirements of the conditions of approval, and to build a home that we can all be proud of. So if you have any questions or any additional concerns, I'm here. I'm very happy to answer. And as Christian mentioned, I have a lot of history with the project. I became involved after it was approved, but I was the engineer that implemented all the subdivision improvements. So I have very good knowledge of all the aspects, utilities, and everything that we went through in the process. And on a different note, I wanted to make a clarification. On the documents that are presented to the commission, it lists me as the applicant. I am the engineer, the designer, and the agent for the applicant. Mr. Khosravi is the owner and applicant for the project. So if it's possible at all, we would appreciate if that amendment is made to the documents, to the official documents, so that everybody has the proper responsibilities on the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chavaria. Mr. Murdoch, is there time remaining on the applicant's clock?
I believe there was approximately 3 minutes remaining.
Mr. Khosravi, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No,
Do you have anything
fine.
that you'd like to say?
No, this has been a wonderful experience getting involved with this project from the beginning. Actually, when first time I saw the project and I saw the lot, I could envision a house there with the magnificent view. I think it's one of the prime locations in the entire Bay Area. So I'm pretty excited to get here, and we've been working with Mr. Murdoch and his staff to go through some of the requirements. And with this approval and the final approval, we would be starting the construction immediately. We have lined up all the requirements, working very closely with Javier. So we intend to start the construction relatively after the final approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll bring it back to the commission. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant or owner? Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Chavaria. So it's kind of a compound question. I wanted you to potentially pick up where Mr. Murdoch left off and speak to the delta in grading based on the building envelope. And then I would note that the project plans show the lot in question. There is a vicinity map in there, but it doesn't really give a lot of information about the grades. So can you speak a little bit to which elevations of the proposed home will be visible from the public street, both permanently and potentially temporarily with other homes that are contemplated being built?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, the decision of changing the footprint of the home, it was particularly to reduce the amount of grading. With the location that the original and approved footprint had, we would have had to move most likely an additional 800 yards of material. And one of the things that we wanted to do, and it's not spelled in any of the conditions of approval, but trying to balance the grading on site. I think it was very important. We have a new road, we have new improvements, and it will be horrible having trucks moving 1,000 yards of dirt out of the subdivision. So we located the home, taking advantage of the areas of the property that require less grading, less disturbance. And basically the grading that we did, it was mostly oriented so that we have the access to the site from the road, but the house itself did not require any further grading. So that was part one of the question, and the part two, okay, the visual impact. As you see, the building is designed kind of in a butterfly way. It has a southern wing, a northwestern wing. So the southern wing will be seen from Linda Mar, and perhaps only the upper 5 feet half wall to the roof, and not the entire building. So you will see a wedge of the building. I think the environmental consultant, they did a very good job in comparing the existing site, our proposed design, and what it would have been if a 2-story structure would have been built as shown on the original approved plans. From our analysis, we have diminished by 60% the exposure of the building from the public areas. And if you consider a long drive as part of the public area, the home is 83 feet setback, and it has plenty of landscaping. So I think that we achieve 2 very important goals. One, to create a minimum impact from the public visual angle, and also create an open home with lots of light, with great views, energy efficient. And so we kind of kill the 2 birds at the same time.
So just to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, if you're looking at the rendering sheet A9, it sounds like you're saying D through H would be seen from the Lindemar side, but only the top approximately 5 feet of that building based on topography. And then A through C would be potentially seen from Roberts Road, but there's a 83-foot setback. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay.
That is correct. And, and also, it's very important to note that this particular lot, and that was one of the big reasons that we decided to go 1 story, it has like a knoll, like a nose. See, you have a flatter area and it has a protrusion, and then the slope starts dropping down really quickly. So that nose creates kind of a visual barrier. When you're down on the highway or in Lindemar, that topographic feature basically take your vantage point further higher from the building. If it would have been just a smooth, normal slope like in the other lots, you would have had more of the building exposed. So we decided to take advantage of that feature so that the building would be hidden. So we incorporated the berms on the side and took advantage of that topographic feature. And I think we achieve the goal of minimizing the exposure.
That was actually my last question for you was, I see the berms in the plan and I wanted to understand the aesthetic that's being proposed for them. I assume they're not going to be left just as dirt berms.
No, basically you won't see, you will not even realize that there is a berm in there. If you're looking from Lindemar or from Roberts Road, you will see a continuation of the slope to the top of the berm. And then from the inside of the building, they have a very gentle grade that will be landscaped, and they are intended to become kind of part of the original topography.
So like natural vegetation.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Not seeing any hands. I will then open it to public comment. Mr. Murdoch, are there any people wishing to speak on this item?
I don't see any hands raised at this point in time. And there we are. We have 2 hands raised now. So I will get us set up and bring the speakers in momentarily. Christine Bowles, please go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Christine Bowles. I have a few technical questions about this project. And first, I've asked for this before, but it would be really helpful if staff would start requiring story polls for these kinds of projects. It's obvious the commissioners are having trouble understanding the scale and the massing, and obviously this is an area with high visibility, and it would really be helpful to see that. The second condition of approval for the subdivision limits the house square footage to 4,300 square feet, and the residence appears to be just shy of that at 4,293. There's an exception for not counting garages, and this 650 additional square feet is noted on the cover sheet as the maximum allowed. However, on page 6 of the drawings with the area calculation diagrams, there appears to be an additional area noted as garbage and utility that is listed as 110 square feet that is not in either of the other numbers. According to the elevations, this area has a ceiling height as tall as the garage and should therefore be included as part of the house square footage. This would put the total house square footage over the maximum allowed limit. Secondly, the project does not comply with the ridgeline setback as established in the conditions of approval. These conditions were worked through with much difficulty with a lot of input from the public as well as green building consultants. There's more than enough room on this large site to move the house forward towards the street so that it is in compliance. The process of violating specific regulations for the very first house in the subdivision will create precedents for future development on this larger parcel, and in my professional opinion is ill-advised. Thirdly, I agree with the staff recommendation to reduce the amount of paving so that the HPD regulations can be met. Again, these used to be sacred regulations in Pacifica, and they seem to be ignored more and more. Thirdly, these homes are supposed to be cutting edge, high performance, and sustainable. It is not appropriate to put the furnace in an unconditioned space next to the garage. Subdivision conditions of approval call for using solar water heating as well as PV, and I do not see that designation on the plans. The system should be signed for pool heating capacity as well. Similarly, I see the rain storage pipes as required, but I don't see any notation about this water being used for landscaping as is required in the conditions. Have WELO calculations been done for water use as part of the landscape plans? I'd also like to ask the planning department what happened to the affordable housing units that were required as part of the subdivision. Were fees paid in lieu? How much money was that? And has that money been used for its intended use, or is it in a separate city account now waiting to build affordable housing? In addition, there's supposed to be an architectural committee created by the Homeowners Association with an architect, environmental consultant, and developer. Is this a part of this community now reviewing these drawings? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. Mr. Murdoch, are there any other speakers?
Yes, there's 2 more hands raised. The next is Summer Lee. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Summer Lee, a resident of Fairmont for over 20 years. I wasn't especially civically engaged when Harmony One was being initially considered, but the project was all abuzz in the city, a city where our infrastructure is already mortally strained, and that Google mansions are not part of Pacifica's character, and that low-income housing is what was and is desperately needed. Even I knew back then that the amount of work, insight, and thorough input that went into the EIR and conditions to get this project approved. So I have a question as to why now there would be a need to make an addendum to the EIR, which has changed. What exactly has changed that would require breaking the agreements, that would, all these vested considerations would be thrown out? And as Christine mentioned, why would the structure need to be put past the ridgeline setback, especially given a 1.44 acre lot to work with. So to make CEQA modifications, especially on such a vetted project, it seems to me to set a bad precedence for the rest of the projects in the subdivision and throws some shade on our enshrined public processes and undermines, the same processes that led to this project. I'm asking you whether approving an amendment to this EIR may be unnecessary as well as outside regular planning practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Next, we have Sue Degree. Please go ahead.
Good evening. Yes, I was on City Council when Harmony One first came to the attention, and there was of all the developments in our city since 2002, no other one had as much attention from the residents. And so City Council and the planning department and planners were definitely involved, very much so. And so, you know, history is important, and what went before you is extremely important, especially we're talking about the community, the whole city of Pacifica. So HPD, Hillside Preservation, is as sacred as it can get, and the prominent ridges. And in the 1980 general plan, which we're still going by, that prominent ridge and that scenic part and the community involvement is so fundamental. So I hope that you, as the present planning commissioners, take into consideration that extreme amount of participation and hard work that went into Harmony to be the state of the art for everybody in the world to come and visit, to learn from how to do it. And so please, an opening for HPD, a little tiny little opening is starting to set a precedent. And you look at the city and all the visitor bureaus that talk about Pacifica, these things enable us to be the community and the city and the destination that it is. So, you know, as representatives of the community, please respect these things that have gone on before you and are still happening in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Degree. Mr. Murdoch, are there any other speakers?
I have no other hands raised at this time.
All right, we'll give a couple more seconds just in case anyone didn't get a chance to raise their hand or use *9 on their phone. All right, I'm not seeing any on my end. Are you, Christian?
I am not.
Okay. All right, I'll bring it back to the commission, and Mr. Murdoch, is it appropriate for the applicant to respond to some of the comments?
Sure. Ordinarily, we'd offer up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal to any of the public comments. So we can begin that if you're open to that, Vice Chair Berman.
Yeah, I would like that. There are a couple comments that were brought up regarding the anticipated design of the home. One that I was specifically interested in is the affordable housing element that was mentioned. So I don't know if Mr. Chavaria has any background on that. But please, Mr. Chavaria, if you could speak for your 3 minutes.
Yes, definitely. When the subdivision final map was going to be in front of City Council, there were several options for the affordable housing. One of the things we needed to build a similar structure to the ones that were being built. And everybody agreed at the time that building a 4,000 square foot home wasn't necessarily a good solution for affordability. So at the time we offered, and I say we, because I was part of the team, but the owner at the time offered the payment of an in lieu fee. So the in lieu fee was paid to satisfy all the requirements. To calculate the in lieu fee, there was a professional hired by the city. They made all the necessary calculations, and the in lieu fee was set and paid, therefore complying with the requirement of the affordable housing. And then the other item that was mentioned was why was the house moved back? Well, the house was moved back because if we place it closer to Olone Drive, it would have required more grading. The house would have to be sort of tucked into the hill, opposed to taking advantage of the area that allows for less grading to be done. We would have also had to cut one additional tree. So in the sense of preserving the tree, diminishing the excavation, we found the best possible location for the house. And that's why we went to single story to diminish the problem. We went back and forth with the staff, and we felt that moving the home wasn't that big of a deal. Staff require the environmental review to make sure that what we were proposing was still within the parameters of the original EIR, within the original restriction. And environmental consultant conducted all the analysis that they needed to, that they felt necessary to ensure that what we're proposing does not go above and beyond the set regulations by the original EIR. So the project as presented, we are not requesting for any expansion, for any changes to the impact. We are just changing the location on the property because it turns a better project, less visual impact, less grading. And as I mentioned before, the original subdivision had kind of a generic footprint for each single lot. You cannot expect on a subdivision of this nature with a topography that is very different from lot to lot to have exactly the same footprint on each lot. It's not that type of subdivision. It's not that we're looking for. And just as a reassurance, this home is going to have all the top of the line elements. A home of this nature is not the one where we're going to be looking to save $20 here on a specific circuit or in a specific area. The home will be built to shine. The home will be built to meet all those conditions of approval. It will be built to make all of us proud. You for approving it, us for designing it, Mr. Khosravi for building it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chavarria. Mr. Khosravi, not sure how much time you have, but did you have anything to add?
No, I'm following the conversations, and no, I don't have anything to add. The only thing I would say that I guess I would like to add is that we are very excited, my wife and I, to finally get the permit and start the construction and move in. I think the area is an amazing area, and these 10 lots would be probably come in front of you within the next 12 to 24 months, and you will have a complete subdivision that has amazing sort of gates and landscaping. It becomes really a landmark in Pacifica. So we're the first one coming in front of you officially, and we're certainly requesting your approval. Mr. Murdoch and his staff has been working non-stop for about a year or so on this project, and we're really looking forward for the approval so we can get this thing done. Some of the comments that were made regarding the solars and energy, yes, we intend to have sort of a best solar technologies, and using all the appliances as much as possible based on mechanical engineering sort of designs to be powered by solar. I'm a person that is very much pro-environmental, green, and we would certainly looking forward to build this with a proper environmental consideration. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll bring it back to the commission. Do any of the commissioners have additional questions for the applicant or for Mr. Murdoch?
Vice Chair Berman, if I may, just before the commission continues, there was a question as to the amount of the in lieu affordable housing fee paid. The amount paid was $344,940, and it looks like that was required in 2013. As of the fiscal year 2021 budget adoption, the estimated ending fund balance as of June 30th, 2020 in the Affordable Housing in Lieu Fund was approximately $260,000. And we've been expending small amounts of those funds for housing related activities, but those funds have not been used to construct any affordable housing as of this point in time. The opportunities to do so have been limited with that small amount of money, relatively small as far as the cost of constructing affordable housing, I should say. And then with respect to the comment about floor area being over the 4,300 square foot limit with inclusion of that trash area does not meet the definition of floor area in that it's not enclosed. The plans, I believe, show that there's a gate type structure or gate type apparatus to define the inner and outer boundaries of that area, but it's not enclosed for purposes of defining floor area. And therefore, by definition, it's not applicable to the 4,300 square foot limit.
Great, thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you. I just had one more question since there was a lot of discussion about sustainable design and green features. Do you have a sense of how much kilowatt generation of solar you're proposing on the roof, or if you don't, approximately how many solar panels you're going to be proposing?
Is that a question for us? Yeah, we haven't done yet a formal load calculation for the building, but as I mentioned before, the amount of roof that we have and the quality exposure that we have, we can easily get 7 to 8 kilowatts without any problems. So the building will provide enough energy for the needs of the building, and a surplus is most likely.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Yeah, I wanted to address the public comment about using solar to heat water for the pool. There's a lot of mention made in the conditions of approval for Ohlone Point about energy retention and also water retention. So it's a two-part question. First is there an intention to use solar water heaters or to use solar energy to cover the consumption of electric water heaters for the pool? And the second question being the condition for Ohlone Point, I see that it's required to use gray water catchment, and there's a lot of focus on conserving water. Is there any system being put in place to, I mean, pools tend to lose a lot of water just through evaporation. Can you describe the systems you're putting in place to mitigate that?
Yes, all the water heating for the building is going to be based on electricity. And with the solar panels capable of producing enough electricity to satisfy the needs of the building, then we feel that we are complying with the condition of approval, that solar energy is used for the use of heating water and all the other uses, as including the pool. Regarding the water, the wastewater harvesting, we have a system that is going to collect the laundry, and that area is going to be used for landscaping purposes. And then rainwater is also being harvested using landscaping, and we are using flow-through planters to manage the water and dispose that out onto the road. So I think that answers your question on how we're addressing those three elements.
You aren't catching the rain or gray water for reuse other than flow through planters, though?
Rainwater is going to be used for landscaping, is stored in tanks. The excess rainwater goes through flow through planters and out onto the street system. The water held on the tanks will be used for landscaping purposes.
That clarification answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Domerit?
Yeah, a quick question on the sight lines from, let's say, Lindemar Beach or from Rockaway Beach. That would, you were mentioning about a 5 foot at the top of the building being observable. Does that include any solar panels that would go on top of the roof?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it does. If you look at the building design, it involves kind of a big fascia board. So that fascia is intended to hide some of the panels and some of the elements that will be installed in the roof. So the garage and the main building area also have a difference of elevation. So we are using that cavity in there for some of the mechanical equipment to be hidden. So none of the mechanical equipment will be mounted on top of the roof, but actually placed that the building itself serves as a shield so that they will not be visible.
Final question, is there any anticipated battery backup of the solar energy? We're challenged these days with a lot of power shut off by PG&E due to fire, due to other things, which have been occurring. Does the design include the capability to store power when power shut off occurs?
Absolutely. I mean, nowadays on a home of this nature, an electric system and a solar panel system is not complete without a battery backup. So yes, it is planned.
Great, thank you.
Not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to ask a couple questions. Oh, Commissioner Leal, I'll let you go first.
Sorry.
No worries.
To piggyback on Commissioner Ferguson's questioning, in one of the diagrams I noticed a reference to a pond. And I guess this question is a couple parts. One is that pond going to be incorporated into that kind of rainwater system you referenced? And then the second part of it is kind of how big, I didn't see any reference to how big that pond may be.
There may be a little confusion in there. This project does not involve any pond. The Harmony at One subdivision that required, as part of the hydro modification and the water management plan, 2 ponds. One of them that is located right off Fassler at the northern entrance of the project. And the other pond is located at the corner of Roberts Road and Fassler. So those 2 ponds are designed to manage the drainage of the entire subdivision, the roads and the outflow from each one of the homes. In addition to those 2 ponds, there is a couple of other big water retaining structures. Down on Roberts Road, below lot 11, there is an underground huge tank that is supposed to also manage with the collection of some of the runoff. And then all the way on the south end on lot 12, there is another drainage structure. So
I can clarify my question. I guess on, is it 1D, or sorry, packet page 77, section BB, it says bridge over pond. I guess I'm just wondering what that reference is to.
Okay, that's different. That's a very small landscaping feature. That is to create a kind of a little bridge sensation of stepping out from the bedrooms onto the yard. So that is a very small area, self-contained, with a recirculating pump. So there will not be any additional use of water in there. It's just an architectural feature. It does not have, it is not part of our drainage system. It's not part of any of the system of the homes. As I said, just a feature of the home.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'll ask a couple questions now. First one's an easy one, not really a question, more so a comment for Mr. Murdoch. It looks like 2 of the COAs were duplicates. It's COA 12 and 22 for the no wastewater, including equipment, cleaning, wash water, vehicle wash water, etc., should drain to the street. So I think those are 2 duplicates. A question for COA 5, which is regarding the paint color. It's on packet page 49. The COA seems pretty specific. It literally requests a Benjamin Moore paint, Maritime White OC-5. I'm wondering if it would be beneficial, especially if this house is going to be the precedent for the area, for the entire subdivision moving forward, if we add in something like or equivalent to that COA, because I would hate if this is the precedent and future developments have to somewhat match this color, that they can't, or even when this house undergoes construction, this paint is discontinued or something.
Sure. With respect to condition number 5, I don't have any problem with or equivalent to the satisfaction of the planning director. This is the specific paint that the applicant proposed to respond to staff's concerns. And so that's why we included the specificity that we did. And also in that it relates to the environmental compliance. We wanted to be able to demonstrate the compliance with that. But there's no objection from us on that issue. With respect to it being a precedent, the architectural review guidelines for the Ohlone Point subdivision have a variety of colors that are acceptable. And so it's unlikely that any other home would necessarily pick specifically a color that's proposed here for the stucco, but it's possible.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that. I just know that especially during construction, it's hard to be constrained to one product. Another one of my questions that wasn't yet asked is, so do the development guidelines have a minimum square footage for homes? So I'm thinking just in regards to scale and character, understanding that the maximum is 4,300 square feet. Is there also a minimum, and would maybe a 1,000 square foot home be considered out of scale in this subdivision in the future?
It's an interesting point. So as far as minimum size, I'm not aware of any in the Harmony at One project approvals. There is a zoning minimum floor area requirement of 850 square feet in the city's municipal code. I would have to speculate as to whether a 1,000 square foot home would be out of scale in this subdivision. I think my judgment is that people will be building relatively large homes up to and approaching the maximum given the cost of these lots and the amount of resources it will take to develop them. They would want to get a nice sizable home for that investment. But again, that's speculation. And so it's hard to say. It's difficult to compare scale for this home because there are no others immediately surrounding it. So we'd have to anticipate, would they be at the upper end or lower end of that range of 850 to 4,300 square feet.
Thank you. And I respect that we're not looking at development on the other lots, but it is something, especially because this is the first development, it's something I wanted to wrap my head around. Understanding that future development might come before us in this area. Another question, I know the access road to this area is currently gated. I'm wondering, is it planned to continue to be gated after this home is constructed? So then, okay.
It is, yes. So during the subdivision improvements and the extended period after their completion and prior to any construction and occupancy of the subdivision, temporary construction type gates were installed. It was also to discourage some vandalism and other illicit activity that was occurring in the unoccupied subdivision on the streets and so forth. Since then, the subdivision owner obtained city approval to construct permanent gates and those have been constructed and permitted and finally inspected. And so there are permanent gates with remote control access and fire key and so forth off of the Fassler Avenue and Roberts Road access points. The other access points more southerly off of Roberts Road, those are not currently proposed for permanent gates. They do, at least one of them has a temporary gate currently there because the site's not in the process or near construction, and those would not remain permanently.
Okay, thank you. So then 2 questions segueing off of that. For the collection services, so recology and, you know, recycle garbage, how is that going to work similar to fire access? Like, does recology have a Knox box key that they open the gate and drive up to the homes?
I don't have the answer to that. You know, there are other communities in the Bay Area that have gates and they receive garbage service. And so I believe there's an arrangement made between the association and the garbage servicing company, but I don't know the specifics for Recology of the Coast at this time. Perhaps Mr. Chavarria does.
Yeah, when the gates were being proposed, we had to contact Waste Management to ensure that the location of the gates, the width of the access, was in compliance with their trucks. And obviously, it complies with the fire truck, but the Waste Management have their own requirements. So yes, there is an agreement, or there will be, I'm not sure if it's in place yet, with the Homeowners Association for providing access, whether it's going to be a key or with a code. But yes, it's something between the Homeowners Association and Waste Management to provide access. They will have access.
Okay, and just for context, I asked that question because in relation to just the development guidelines, I'd imagine that something like that would be an aspect of the development guidelines. I just didn't see any information on it. I don't know. Let me ponder kind of my thoughts on that a little bit. In the meantime, I'll let Commissioner Godwin speak. Commissioner God. Oh.
Yes, thank you. Your questions prompted a thought in my head. I know the RHNA people are really encouraging us to zone for ADU units. Would ADUs be permitted in this development? And if so, would they be limited to 850 square feet or larger?
So accessory dwelling units or ADUs could be constructed in this project in the Harmony at One subdivision. If you've carefully reviewed the Harmony at One approval materials, the approvals originally included a prohibition on accessory dwelling units, but since then state law has changed and prohibited CC&Rs from including prohibitions on accessory dwelling units. And cities must allow them, but for very specific findings, which would not be applicable in this case. As to the maximum floor area, it really depends where on the site an ADU would be proposed. And so it's difficult for me to say anything other than the maximum floor area would be as provided in the municipal code.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean maximum, I meant minimum size ADU.
The minimum would be the minimum provided in the municipal code, which is 150 square feet, provided it meets the requirements of an efficiency unit. So they can be very small. The challenge for this site, would be to find a place that's an allowable location that wouldn't result in other adverse impacts, but I'm certain it could be designed.
Thank you.
And Vice Chair Berman, if I could circle back on a comment I made earlier.
Sure.
With respect to the door enclosure on the garbage room, it certainly is the understanding, and specific discussions occurred between city staff and the applicant on that point. I do note that probably through different versions that we've exchanged as the plans have been modified, the particular open gated door enclosure is not on that garbage room. Hopefully I can find the packet page, forgive me. But in any case, the fixture style is shown as a D38, which is a bifold door. I would suggest if the commission does take action to approve this project tonight, that we add a condition of approval, ensuring that the intended open gate type door is installed so that it is an unenclosed area as the design is intended to be. That would ensure that it does not meet the definition of enclosed for purposes of floor area and would keep the project below the limitation. And I would suggest that that have a minimum requirement to meet the definition of open work, which is in our fence regulations. And I believe it's a 60% maximum surface area, solid surface area, I should say.
Okay.
So for the commission's consideration, if the project advances to that point.
Okay, thank you. I took note of that. And then I do have just one more question in regards to the gates that are along Fassler and Roberts Road. The open space associated with this subdivision, is that intended to be privately owned, publicly accessible? Or is it just area that can't be developed on just for visual reasons?
So I am not specifically prepared to address the original subdivision open space restrictions. I'm not aware of any public access component, and what I recall reviewing was that it was limited to private use by occupants of the subdivision, but Mr. Chavarri has indicated he has some additional information on that point.
Right. There is two different types of open space in the subdivision. The big parcel in the center, the one that is designated as Lot A, that is actually a fully dedicated conservation easement. There is a land management company that handles that. And when the negotiations were being done with the land management company for them to take the control and the maintenance of the parcel, they would not agree to do it if it had public access because of liability issues. Who would do that? If people would come and start making trails and things like that, who would be responsible? So at that point, the subdivision owners basically step outside and let the land management company that is doing the conservation easement handle that. So that parcel, as I said, is a net conservation easement with no public access. There is two other parcels on the northern end of the road, the ones that are designated as parcel 1 and 2. Those are open space easements, and those are to be maintained by the homeowners association. So right now, there is no restriction of public access onto those two parcels.
Thank you. But then it sounds like those two parcels don't necessarily welcome public access. Is that correct?
That is the strip of land between Fassler and the road itself. So it's heavily vegetated. It's right above the pond on Fassler. And there's really not a lot of opportunities for hiking in there.
Okay. No, I know, I can visualize where you're speaking of now. Thank you. That's all my questions. My biggest concern, and pardon me if this isn't specifically related to this project, but is the fact that those roads will be gated. I just want to make sure that we're not unjustly excluding people from an area. Are there any other questions from the commission? All right, if there's no other questions, happy to entertain a motion. See, not seeing any hands. I could scroll to the motion. Here we go. All right. Let's see. I move that the Planning Commission consider the addendum with the Harmony at 1 Roberts Road subdivision final EIR certified by the Planning Commission on October 15th, 2007, and by the City Council on November 13th, 2007, and adopt the addendum to the Harmony at 1 Roberts Road subdivision final EIR. Approve specific plan SP-164-17 by adopting the resolution included as attachment A to the staff report, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A, which also incorporate the COA that Mr. Murdoch mentioned regarding the garbage non-enclosure areas, or area rather. As well as incorporating or equivalent to the satisfaction of the planning director in COA number 5. And then lastly, amending the applicant or rather amending Mr. Chavaria as shown as the agent of the applicant.
Commissioner Berman, with respect to that change, that's not a condition of approval type change. And in fact, it's not in error. The application materials do show him as the applicant on the form. Now, whether that's the case in fact or not, it sounds like Mr. Chabria wants to correct that he's no longer the applicant or was never intended to be. And that's a paperwork exercise that he should follow up with staff after the hearing.
Got it. So let's strike that last revision that I mentioned. And so including conditions of approval in Exhibit A of the resolution and incorporate all maps and testimony into the record by reference. Sorry, that was choppy. Is there a second? Commissioner Godwin.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Berman.
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat.
Yes.
Commissioner Ferguson.
No.
Commissioner Godwin.
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser.
Yes.
Commissioner Leal.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Chavaria and Mr. Khosravi.
That's right. Thank you very much. Thank you, the commissioner. I really appreciate. And again, Mr. Murdoch, thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you, commissioners. It's always a pleasure. Thanks.
And before we move on to the conclusions of our meeting, I'll go ahead and read. Anyone aggrieved by the action of the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision in writing to the City Council. If any of the above actions are challenged in court, issues which may be raised are limited to those raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Judicial review of any city administrative decision may be had only if a petition is filed with the court no later than the 90th day following the date upon which the decision becomes final. Judicial review of environmental determinations may be subject to a shorter time period for litigation, in certain cases 30 days following the date of final decision. All right, so thank you, Mr. Chavaria. Next up, so communications. Do we have commission communications? Anyone have anything fun to share? Commissioner Hauser.
I'm not sure if it's fun, but I just want to say welcome to our new commissioner. It's nice to meet you and looking forward to working with you.
Do I get a chance to respond to that?
Of course.
Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to working with all of you. And with that little bit of background in like 45 years of working in the coastal environment, I'm hoping I can be of a lot of help in looking at our challenges to our coast and coastal zones.
Thank you, Commissioner Domerat. We're looking forward to working with you. Anyone else? All right, staff communications. Mr. Murdoch, is there anything you'd like to share?
Nothing further than just restating that the City Council will consider the text amendment for the special use permit regulations on April 12th. Thank you.
I'll be there.
Excellent.
All right. I guess that moves us on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Ferguson,
I move to adjourn.
Commissioner Hauser.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat,
Yes.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Yes.
Commissioner Godwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser,
Yes.
Commissioner Leal.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
And everybody.
Good night.
Good night.